In this exercise, we're going to take a look at grouping in Tableau. First, I'll connect to my data source. It's a Microsoft Excel file, and if I scroll down, it's NFL Offensive Player Stats, 1999 to 2013. And I open that file, and I'm actually going to drag that worksheet into the stage. That's the worksheet or data set I'm working with. So in this case, I'm looking at the multiple ways in which I can group data. So let's say I have a very simple question. What's the difference between different categories of offensive players and their scores in the 40-yard dash? Well, I know in measures I have 40-yard dash times. And the question I have to answer is how different categories of players break down. Now I know that I have fantasy positions here, or fant positions. These are the positions that the different players play. If I want to group them into different areas, now I'm only looking at offensive players, so I know I have players who throw the ball, players who run the ball, and players who catch the ball. And if I look to group those players, so I can click on the pill in dimensions, and you're always looking at dimensions when you create groups. So I click on the chevron in the pill, and I say group. In this case, I'm looking to create a group. So create group. Here's the groups of players I have: quarterback, running back, tight end, and wide receiver. Now, you may not be familiar with football, so let me guide you through it. Tight ends and wide receivers catch the football. So I'm going to group them together. So I click on both of them. So I click on tight ends. I hold Shift or Control or Command if I'm using an Apple, and I click Group. That combines both tight ends and wide receivers as a group. So this is the group of people who catch the football. Okay, now I'm looking at groups of people who run the football. So running backs are a group. So I select running backs, and I click, and I select them as a group. And I click on quarterbacks. Those are the people who throw the football. Click on that, and that's a group. And I click OK. I can even change the name from fant position to group to grouped by position. And there I go. So I have these grouped by position. You can tell a group field by the paperclip icon next to it in the pill. So a paperclip means a grouped position or a group. So if I was to put them in columns, I have quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends, and wide receivers because I have the throwers, the runners, and the catchers. Now I want to say compare their 40-yard dash times. I put that into rows. And here I can compare their 40-yard dash times. Now notice this is a sum. So I want to see the average 40-yard dash time from people in those groups. So I simply go to Measure, and I go to Average, and there I go. So what I'm seeing is that who has the fastest 40-yard dash time? Well, it's the people who run the ball, followed closely by the people who catch the ball, and the slowest group of the offensive players are the quarterbacks. But notice they're pretty close, and I can actually click that T mark there, which shows the numerical labels here as another indicator. So what I've done is I've grouped these three items, and this is one way of grouping. Now there's other ways of grouping, so let's take a look. So let's say I take and undo all of this work. Now I take the Fant position, and I say here, I'm in columns, and I take them. Now I want to still make these groups. Here's a different way. So the first way I showed, I can create groups within the dimensions area here. I can also create them here. So if I click on tight ends, and then I hold down Control or Command or Shift and click on wide receivers. Now I've selected those two. Let's say I even have my graph out. So I'm looking at 40-yard dash times, and I'm looking at rows. Go to average. There we go, average. And I want to lump these together. So I can go to the labels, and I can select tight end and wide receiver by selecting Shift or Control and click. And I can here hit Control, click, and I can create or group here. Notice how it combines tight ends and wide receivers. Here I go. So I have that comparison. Another way I can do it is if I can just pull down my mouse, select tight ends, and drag it over wide receivers as well. Select both. And I can do the same. So Control click or right click, and I can group. And now I've created this grouping, tight ends and wide receivers. Okay, so there's a few different ways of making groups. This is one. I go in here, select average, measure some average. Here, select them both, and I group. Notice though, if I want to make this a group that shows under one column, I do that using the labels, and I go to measure average, or I do it in the dimensions area. When you have a large data set, doing it in the dimensions area is going to be a lot more efficient than doing it out here in this area. So the dimensions area might be your default. Tend to go there. But in any case, you can group things together. So if you have a item that's a representative of a large group of things and you want to break those down into their groups for analysis, here's how you do it.